The blue sky is but a luxury for London, England. Blue is a color that reveals sadness amidst brightness. John has been working in cleaning for many years. He is already accustomed to the blue skies and gray days. Only by cleaning the windows can John earn his wages. Through the glass, John can always see various passers-by. Behind these people are complex life stories. As a window cleaner on the streets of London, John repeats his monotonous work daily, earning a meager income. As a single father, John can only entrust his child to neighbors or welfare agencies during the day. Due to their impoverished background, 3-year-old Michael possesses a maturity beyond his peers. His only joy comes from the bedtime stories told by his father. Even when Michael walks to school in step with his father, it is a simple happiness for the two of them. Michael asks where his mother is. This question leaves John speechless. He can only vaguely answer that his mother has gone to a distant place. In a child's mind, how far is distant? Is it far enough that his mother never wishes to return to see her son? On a sunny afternoon, John takes his son to the countryside. A couple before them praises the livability of the countryside, their words revealing their fondness for Michael. It turns out that John, out of necessity, plans to send his child to live with others. Providing his child with pets, computers, and other luxuries is an unattainable dream for poor Father John. Already filled with worry, John is stunned upon seeing the couple's home, and his anxious words come to a halt. He slowly says that his son deserves a complete and happy family. John does not want his childhood experiences to repeat themselves in his son. Facing the couple's evaluation of him as a biological father, John only hopes his child remembers that he is just an ordinary window cleaner. Then, John takes Michael onto a footbridge and tells his son that the speeding cars carry countless people to their destinations. He asks his son if he would like to change their living situation. Michael seems to sense something and only replies that he loves their current home. This response fills John with guilt. He cannot create a better future for his child, so he goes to the welfare agency again to express his dissatisfaction. In fact, John does not have much time left. He hopes his son can forget him and grow up healthily in a harmonious and happy family. He harbors doubts about the seemingly gentle proposal from the welfare staff because he knows that when Michael turns 18 and learns the truth about his mother's disappearance and his father's death, it will be a heavy blow for the child. Since John cannot provide his child with a privileged background, he sends him to a better living environment. But before that, John hopes his child can forget him. Young Michael was unaware of his father's struggles. In his eyes, only his father's embrace and the stories he repeatedly listened to were the happiest times. John tried his best to stay by Michael's side, even if it was just the afternoon sunlight or the sight of construction vehicles at work. Simple joys became the most precious memories for the father and son. John naturally felt reluctant to part with Michael, but seeing other children with their fathers and in a nurturing environment, he understood that was true living. What John could provide was merely the basics for survival. John continuously met with families interested in adopting Michael. No matter how harmonious the family environment was, John always prioritized Michael's feelings. If his son loved puppies, he would never send him to a family that raised rabbits. In addition to his cleaning job, John privately took on several cleaning tasks in suburban communities. One day, a regular customer, Mrs. McDonald, who lived in the suburbs, invited John to help her at home. John was always troubled, not knowing how to explain the impending separation to Michael. The lady told John that her mother instilled in her the concept of reincarnation from a young age. When she was young, she dismissed it, but as she grew older, she became increasingly convinced that life would eventually end, but would also return to people in different forms. After finishing his work, John went to pick up Michael from the neighbor's house. However, his son remained in low spirits, silent in front of his playmates, hiding under the table. It turned out that Michael had vaguely sensed his father's abnormality and felt annoyed by the unfamiliar families he frequently met. John had no choice but to pause the adoption discussions and took his son to the park to play. While playing, Michael accidentally discovered a dead beetle. For the first time, John explained the meaning of death to his son. Death means no more eating, no more activity, no more changes. All living beings in the world, including humans, gradually move towards the end of life from the moment they are born. Michael asked if death was sad. John didn't know how to answer, At least this sadness was not as pleasant as the joyful sound coming from the ice cream truck. To make a living, John endured pain and continued to work. But to the clients, this was merely an excuse for laziness. In their eyes, John was just a labor force that could be paid for cleaning services. Faced with the client's cold mockery, John, as a father, reined in his former arrogance and could only resolve conflicts with silence. The wilting flowers and frail patients in the hospital made John truly feel the horror of death. Since one would eventually die, why not vent once? John returned to the client's residence, repeatedly throwing eggs at the clean glass. Perhaps this was also a different kind of memory before the end. John's condition continued to worsen, with frequent symptoms of pain and drowsiness. The warm water brought by his son and the comforting little hand became John's greatest solace. He longed for his health to care for the lovely Michael, rather than being in this situation where his 3-year-old son had to take care of him, a seriously ill father. Therefore, the adoption process still needed to be pushed forward. The family he contacted this time had decent conditions, not a wealthy family high above others, and there was a small dog that his son loved, making it an inclusive big family. The couple promised that Michael would be their last adopted child. However, seeing his son take back the dinosaur toy, John understood that the child's wishes were the final deciding factor. After all, the children from that family always boasted about their bigger dinosaur toys to Michael. After several adoption attempts were blocked, John confided in Shona, the welfare worker who had always helped him, about his past experiences. Michael's mother was Russian, and John had thought that the birth of the child would keep her, but their impoverished life ultimately led the woman to quietly return to Russia, never to be heard from again. Now diagnosed with cancer, John believed that rather than letting Michael be adopted by others, it would be better to contact the child's mother through the welfare agency. Regarding such cross-border matters, Shona also expressed her views. Firstly, finding the other party is extremely difficult. Secondly, the related procedures are complicated and tedious. And most troublesome is the inability to determine whether Michael's mother can provide a stable life for the child. Shona's superior had previously advised John that the number of registered adoptive families at the welfare agency was limited, and if he did not make a decision soon, he would miss the opportunity. John was well aware of these situations. He had thought that adoption was just a simple meeting and an easy choice. But if his judgment were to be wrong, and if these families were not the best home for Michael, what should he do? Various concerns made it difficult for John to make up his mind. As vomiting became more frequent and breathing gradually became difficult, John knew that his time was running out. This day was John's 34th birthday. With his meager savings, he bought ingredients with his son to make Michael's favorite chocolate cake. The cake was topped with 34 candles, and young Michael realized for the first time that his 34-year-old father had already aged. John wanted to explain the meaning of aging to his son again, but when he saw his son pick up the 35th candle, he was stunned. He knew that on this day next year, he would no longer be in this world. John wished he could celebrate another birthday with his son, but heaven was unwilling to grant him even one more day to be with his child. John took his son to meet the arranged adoptive family again. If the wealthy couple in the suburbs was the best choice, the material conditions of the families contacted afterward gradually declined. The woman in front of him was no exception. She had become pregnant out of wedlock at 16, and due to being a minor, was forced to give her biological child up for adoption. Until she discovered that she could not conceive, she was determined to adopt a child. She deeply understood the pain of giving up a child and the heartache of being unable to raise one. This time, John was deeply moved. This was the first time he truly felt the other person's genuine emotions, rather than the hypocritical expressions and deliberately created harmony of many families before. She was also the first adoptive parent willing to sit down and play with Michael, rather than those couples who looked down from above and talked about theories. Their mutual love was enough. Perhaps the single woman before him would be the best home for his son. When the woman asked about John's childhood, John fell into memories. John's memories of childhood were very vague. He only remembered following his father, a truck driver, around before the age of 4, and then moving between several foster homes. Michael asked when his grandfather passed away, and this question left everyone present speechless. But John understood in his heart that what mattered was that Michael already knew John was about to leave this world. On another sunny day, John went to work at Mrs. McDonald's house again. As the rain arrived, the lady expressed her longing for her deceased husband. Listening to the elder talk calmly about life and death, John revealed the softness deep within his heart. Since childhood, John had been competitive in order to fight for the limited resources in foster homes. But after Michael was born, seeing all the mothers picking up and dropping off their children at kindergarten, he wished he could find a mother for his son. To this day, even a complete father and family had become a luxury. The lady comforted John, saying that the current choice was not a helpless act, but a brave one, a courage to entrust life and affection. John should be proud of this, and his son would feel proud of him too. Death is never the end, but a continuation of another kind of companionship. When John found it increasingly difficult to climb the ladder and was more prone to fainting, Michael would always be the first to care for his beloved father. This was the most healing comfort in John's remaining time. Now, as long as there was a suitable foster family, John would take his son to meet them at the first opportunity. But if the mother in the adoptive family viewed childbirth as a burden, and the father loved the model far more than the child, even if the family environment was exquisite, it would not be suitable for Michael. After all, like him, his son loved the real train that carried the hope of life, rather than the luxurious train models that served as entertainment in a comfortable life. When the exquisite couple took back the gifted dolls, the gap in life did not make the father and son feel inferior. John reminded his son to thank the couple for their kindness and return the dolls with dignity. Even in a life of poverty, they retained their own integrity and upbringing. This unpleasant meeting led Michael to ask his father what adoption meant. John told his son that when parents are unable to care for their children, they will send the children to families with better living conditions. Michael could not resist adoption. He only loved his father, the one who peeled grapes and made cakes for him. This time, John was furious. He found Shona and sternly accused the couple of letting the child hear words related to adoption. Shona had her own difficulties. She was aware of John's special circumstances, so she had been violating rules to allocate resources for the father and son in advance. John suddenly realized that Michael's understanding left him at a loss. The once naive son had grown up overnight. He felt both comforted and helpless. John wished he could witness his son grow step by step, but he no longer had the time. John tried to walk the balance beam like his son, yearning to play with him. But with illness plaguing him, even maintaining simple balance became a luxury. This made John extremely angry. John began to forbid Michael from touching the utensils he had used. When even pouring juice caused his hands to tremble, the father no longer indulged his son's temper tantrums. Michael angrily threw his belongings out of the room. At that moment, John smiled, for his son had grown up and learned to express his emotions to him. While painting, John was curious about what was inside his son's toy truck. A single stone made John realize who could truly enter Michael's heart. John went again to the quiet countryside, discarding all noise, just to listen to his innermost thoughts. At this moment, he had to make a choice that would affect his son's lifelong happiness. Only by choosing correctly could he face death and parting without regrets. In the end, John organized his vehicle, took out the beetle symbolizing death and the only glove left by his wife, sold the vehicle, and transferred all his work and clients to his colleagues. He devoted the remaining time to accompany his son wholeheartedly to the amusement park, a place he had never visited due to poverty and busyness. John hoped that his son's memories of him would be filled with joy and beauty. For the last time, John finished telling Michael a bedtime story. This time, John told Michael that when the beetle leaves its shell, it will go to a broader forest. Soon, the father would also leave his shell like the beetle, but the father would always be by his side, existing in the sky, the forest, the earth, the sunshine, the rain, and the raindrops. Even if Michael could not see his father, the father could see him. Even if they could not talk, the father could hear his heart. The taste of grapes was the father missing him. The moist raindrops were the father embracing him. Michael must remember that wherever and whenever, his father loved him deeply. His wife's glove, the father-son photo, the hat, and the windshield wiper A small box contained all of John's belongings left for his son. Even if he could not buy Michael a puppy, he gave all his love to his child. Michael also noticed the changes in his father, and like an adult child, he took care of the seriously ill John with great care. John ultimately finalized the foster care plan, sending his beloved son to an apartment in the suburbs, which belonged to a single woman. He reminded his son that this would be a new home, and that since his father would not be around, he must be well-behaved and understanding.